Have you ever asked yourself, how did Iron Man get so cool? Or have you ever woke up from a deep slumber and asked yourself, what should I look for in a cheap, reliable supercar? You know, the one that you can daily and the one that your friends probably had as a poster hanging on their bedroom wall. Yes, I know this is an important question that we ask ourselves every single day, isn't it? And that's exactly why we're bringing you the comprehensive guide to go over the what, the why, and the how of the Audi R8. Think of this as the car video for dummies. And by the end of this video, you're gonna know way more than you ever thought you needed to know about the Audi R8. And you're probably gonna want to buy one because this is the do-it-all bargain supercar, which joined the short list of dream cars for pretty much everyone after it hit harder than a bass drop when it first was revealed a little over a decade ago. And real quick, this video was brought to you by our friends over at Squarespace, which I'll dig into a little bit more later on in this video. Okay, so buckle up, let's go. Now, before we properly get into the R8, we think that we should take you back to the start of Audi's Quattro origin. You see, Audi's always kind of had this gap in their lineup. They had their sedans, they had their wagons, and they even had their sporty Quattro coupe. But they never had a flagship car, something that would blow everything else out of the water. And this is where Quattro played a major part in this formula, because it's what really established Audi's place in the performance car market in motorsports. If you know anything about rally, well then you know how the rest of this story plays out. Because the Quattro goes on to dominate, Group B becomes a thing, then Group B goes away because it was way too dangerous of a thing. Yeah, that is absolutely bonkers. And then the Audi Quattro lives on in all Audi models. And even with all this racing success and this Quattro pedigree, Audi was still pretty hesitant to dive headfirst into the big boys pool. But this all changed in 1998 when Audi acquired Lamborghini. And with an all-new Italian parts bin to play with, there was some fun to be had. And Audi went to work right away. First though, they needed to dig Lamborghini out of the financial ruin, and they did it with this mid-engine supercar that you may or may not have heard of before. Yes, the Gallardo. And we all know how much of a success that vehicle was for Lamborghini, having sold over 14,000 units in its roughly 10-year career. And I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of the Gallardo, especially the LP560s, which were 09 and newer, the facelift model. But that's a story for another day because the hero in today's video is the R8. And back when the Gallardo came out, Audi started thinking, maybe we should create our own supercar. And there's no better way to create something than to go race it. And we already covered Audi's domination and eventual departure of rally sport, but back in the early 2000s, the German brand started to take it to the competition on the racetrack. This time there wouldn't be any dirt paths or near misses of spectators though. Instead, this was wheel-to-wheel racing. And Audi was dominating at this race that you may have heard of called Le Mans. Did I say that right? Le Mans? Le Mans? No, that's a different race, Lemons. And this success only added high-octane fuel to the fire. And Audi's concept development department, yeah, they were stoked. And for the 2003 racing year, they premiered the Le Mans Quattro concept car, and this was their first mid-engined supercar. Okay, now something that I find really interesting is concept cars. And when they come out, some of them look extremely cool. Like check out this Scion TC concept car with those billionaire doors and looks to die for. And we all know how that car turned out for the mass-produced model, right? Bruh. Yeah, it doesn't look nearly as cool. And usually with concept cars, maybe they'll carry over like 5% of the design language, like maybe. But Audi was trying to do something different. And here is the R8 concept car, ladies and gentlemen. Just look at this. Yeah, you don't have to close one eye and squint with the other to see the resemblance to the actual road-going model. No, not at all. Now, yes, the insane twin-turbo V10 engine was replaced by a more mild version of Audi's naturally aspirated 4.2-liter V8, which you may or may not know was plucked from this ideal favorite, the B7 RS4. And while power wasn't incredible, it was definitely reasonable with 420 horsepower and 370 foot-pounds of torque. And the way it put it down to the ground, thanks to Audi's Quattro system, was really a lot like nothing else in the supercar world. And I don't know if you've ever heard one of these straight piped, but RIP headphone users. Yeah, by golly, your neighbors will thoroughly enjoy that sound. Now, there are a couple of different shifting options that you could choose from. First, you had the 6-speed R8 Auto, which at a glance kind of looks like a manual transmission, but it's not. And it's also not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. It's just more of a acquired taste. But our friend Jack Ultramotive has one in his R8, and I don't hear him complaining, not one bit. But of course, if you're out there to save the manuals, which you can do by grabbing one of our ideal tees, there is the Piece de Resistance, a 6-speed gated manual transmission. And so I guess you can teach an old German dog new tricks, because Audi finally learned how to be as cool as Ferrari. And since Audi's been around since 1932, it just took them some odd 90 plus years to do it. And nowadays, the first gen R8 is literally a grab bag of cheap supercar goodness. And when you can find an early V8 for around $60K on cars.com, that is an incredible deal for a head-turning supercar. Heck, it's more than I paid for my fiance's Jeep, a Chrysler product, not a fine German automobile like the R8, which is a halo car. Now, if we were to teleport back to 2008 when the V8 R8 was brand new, you'd be looking at dropping roughly $120,000 plus more monies for any extras that you'd want. So that means in the past decade or so, these cars have depreciated to half of their original value, and they still hit just as hard. And so if you want to find your ideal R8, go check out the links down in the description, because things are about to get a little bit more expensive. Since the V8 was the only available power plant for the first couple of years, which wasn't a bad thing at all, but it didn't exactly have supercar performance. Luckily, Audi had a nasty naturally aspirated trick up their sleeve. And before we dig into Audi's fire breather, I want to tell you about our friends over at Squarespace, who sponsored this video. And if you don't know, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to build a website and run your business on. And not only do they have award-winning templates, but the thing that I love is that they have 24/7 support. And no matter what industry you're in, you can build it on Squarespace. Plus, it is so simple to use. I mean, if I can do it, you can definitely do it. And if you've been sitting here thinking about a good domain name to start with, well, guess what? They sell domain names as well. So if you're not ready to build a website, but you have an awesome domain name, there's no better time than now to snag it for when you're ready. Plus, the longer you wait, the better chance that someone else takes it. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/idealmedia for 10% off. And that's for either a website or a domain name. And I've also linked to it down below. And thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video. So that was it. The R8 was here, and it was here to stay. And it really made a great impression everywhere that it went. After all, it was the Iron Man car. And when a car has red carpet fame, it instantly becomes even more recognizable. And plus, it didn't hurt at all that it looked great, it was fast as hell, and was more practical and user-friendly than anything else in the market. So, what could they have done to make it that much better? Well, how does putting a Lamborghini V10 in place of the V8 sound? Yeah, it sounds like this. Yes, that sounds like a proper supercar. And that was Audi taking advantage of the recent acquisition of Lamborghini. And they just knew that they had to make the R8 just a wee bit spicier.
Nice.
And so the German supercar now made 518 horsepower and 391 foot-pounds of torque. And that beautiful naturally aspirated V10 was a slightly detuned version of the Gallardo motor. The MidLife Cycle R8 also saw the introduction of the Spider version. And this was built for those of you that love to hear the V8 scream in full stereo. And while yes, I agree, not having a fixed roof is definitely less race car, I'd be hard-pressed not buying a Spider, because topless motoring, especially with an exotic V10 right behind your head, sounds pretty ideal to me. And brand new, the topless model came in at roughly $125,000. But nowadays, you can pick them up anywhere between 80 and 90 grand. And that's thanks to our best friend over here, depreciation. Now, you could also get, in 2011, the R8 GT, which not only added power to the mighty V10, but it also went on a Jenny Craig weight diet. And the way I look at it is that this is the R8 that you want to buy if you're not a race car driver, but you want to pretend that you are one on the street. I also think looks-wise, Audi absolutely killed it with the aesthetics of the R8 GT. And new, they were roughly $200,000 back in 2011, but you can get one now for a bargain price point of about $125K. And right after the R8 GT, Audi decided to give the R8 a facelift. And that's when they added the extra spicy new model called the V10 Plus. And as you can tell, it has a slightly more contemporary exterior, but the big reason you'd want to get one of these facelifted models is because of the upgraded S-Tronic dual clutch transmission. Gone was the R-Tronic single clutch. And again, I've spent quality seat time with a single clutch R-Tronic and it was really great, but you have to know how to drive it. And this is where the S-Tronic shines. It literally is so good that your grandma could get into it and hit 60 miles per hour in way less than 4 seconds on her first try. With an R-Tronic, probably not. Now, as we know, all good things have to come to an end, and the last of the Gen 1 Audi R8s rolled off the line in 2015. But there was a more capable younger brother on the horizon. And yes, the R8 was due for a major overhaul, and it got one with the release of the second generation in 2017. And as good as the Gen 1 was, the Gen 2 was better in pretty much every single way. Well, except if you wanted to save the manuals, because the Gen 2, they decided to go full dual clutch. And as far as the bones of the second iteration of the R8, it shared a lot with its brother from another mother, the Lamborghini Huracan. You see, the new R8 has the same 5.2 liter V10 with a bump in horsepower. And if you spring for a standard, you're getting 533 horsepower and 398 foot-pounds of torque. But you could also get the V10 Plus, and now you're looking at 602 horsepower and 413 foot-pounds of torque. Now, having driven a 2017 V10 Plus, I can tell you that it is the most daily drivable supercar you will ever drive. This German exotic does everything so well. And really the only area that I could dock points from it being the perfect supercar is that it's an Audi. Yes, it's not an exotic brand through and through. And so if you want the looks, 10 out of 10 times you should get the Lamborghini Huracan, which is essentially an Italian skinned version of the R8. And I'm not saying that the R8 doesn't attract attention, it really does, but it definitely doesn't pull as much attention as a Lambo. So that's definitely some food for thought if you're thinking about getting an R8 or a Lambo, which I wish I was in your seat because both of those are ideal cars and super easy to buy like a pro. Now the V10 and V10 Plus ran for a couple of years, and then in 2019, Audi gave another refresh to the R8. And so they sprinkled on a little bit more power, and the base coupe got 562 horsepower now with 413 foot-pounds of torque. And the newly renamed R8 Coupe Performance Quattro retained the same power as the previous V10 Plus. And this is the current generation of R8 that we still have now, with the new model likely headed our way in the next couple of years, or at least we can hope. But with the way that the car world has been kind of trending, the third generation R8 might be some sort of either hybrid or fully electric car. So if you want that visceral, naturally aspirated driving experience, the second generation R8 is an absolute bargain. Yes, it is a lot of money, but it is a contemporary supercar. And who can complain about a screaming V10 pushing you down the road? And if you're looking at a first year base V10, you can expect to pay close to 130 grand. And then prices tend to go up from there. And I think most of your car buddies would agree that the R8 is one of the most usable supercars in both the used and new market. I mean, you really can have your cake and eat it too. It's got great visibility, room in the main cabin, and storage for your groceries. Plus, you'll look like a badass driving it, and it can do daily driving duties and tear up canyon roads on the weekend. It's one of those cars that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And both generations have aged extremely well and look somewhat professional. Now, if I were buying one, that first generation R8, especially with a manual transmission, has hit that depreciation valley. They're starting to trend upwards. They're starting to appreciate. And that is the one that I would use the ideal car strategies on. And I really don't think that you would get hurt owning one for a year, and the smiles per gallon would be through the roof, especially if you get a Spider. So that is our dummies guide to the Audi R8, which I think it's safe to say it's a Lamborghini with Audi reliability. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. And in the comments, let us know, is it the best used supercar deal on the market right now? Or is there a better one? Let us know in the comments, because I think most people wouldn't kick it out of the garage. Plus, if you're new here, please subscribe and turn on that notification bell. And as always, keep living the ideal lifestyle.